conversation with people are most important. I'm no expert at all, but I think, you know, conversations have gone out the window a bit, and that leads to misinformation and things. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's some service areas, especially I can go, you know, talk about my own service areas of housing benefit and council tax, and there's some quite complex legislation involved, and it's really important that people understand, especially from their benefit entitlement claims, what that actually means. So I totally agree with you that there is a need for face-to-face, and we do have the opportunity for appointments in the reception down at County Hall and also at Ryde Library.
Would any officers or cabinet members want to add anything? Any further questions from members? Councillor Lilly, Michael.
I'm just puzzled on the island roads on 19, page 15. As a ward councillor, I get a lot of complaints about island roads, which I put on. So I'm actually quite interested that the 121 figure seems to be low. I'm quite surprised by it, really. If this is for the whole island over roughly a 12-month period, I myself have probably over the year put residents' complaints that would be about, well, at least about 40 that I can think of over the year. So I would like to dig deep a little bit on that figure, really, because is it that people are actually not recording, or is a councillor like me who puts forward complaints of, you know, 2 island roads? They go through the Samantha O'Rourke, right? And normally, and I normally get a response. I mean, I compliment them from that. I do actually get a response, but it doesn't seem to figure with this particular figure. Can I ask Sharon or ask the cabinet member for transport in that regard? I'm just puzzled.
Well, I'm obviously happy to pick that up and get some more information for you. Oh, sorry.
Chair, thank you, Michael, for your question. I suspect what's happening is that you are referring to incidents that get reported, numbers of which you've carried out yourself, and those that are complaints, which are slightly different things. Complaints and incidents are not quite the same thing. I suspect that's what the discrepancy is. I hope that helps.
Is it possible to have some more detail of that? Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to highlight that I'm really pleased to see some of the recommendations that were actually made in November 2020. The Corporate Scrutiny Committee on which I sat have actually been implemented, most largely to do with the anomalies with the unacceptable behaviour policy and the complaints policy. So I'd just like to highlight work that has been done through the recommendations of that Scrutiny Committee. Thank you.
This is probably a good time to bring up the comments made by the then chairman of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee, and I'll read out an observation from Councillor Gowett. In general, I found this encouraging. For example, the revisions to the policies, the move to warning letters not being held on file indefinitely. I look forward to the web pages about general complaints. Although the About page on the website refers to being able to make a complaint by email, an email address was not provided, so it's something that we might look at there. The FAQ on How do I go about making a complaint? Does not refer to complaints by email. Or is there an email address? A link under related links go to a page that says no matches are found for the query. The contact tab has no email address listed. The Do It Online tab has a link that then goes to a page requiring an account sign-in. I'm also concerned that the percentage of complaints that are being recorded to have a learning outcome is still low. It should be possible to learn something from the vast majority of complaints. I'll pass that on to Chief Executive, who can circulate it as necessary. I would ask one question about the document. Under the Ombudsman's statistics, it says satisfactory outcomes, and we have 0 satisfactory outcomes. What does this number mean? What are we talking about in terms of satisfactory outcomes at this point in the process? Someone enlighten me. It's on page 14 of the papers for this meeting. The table just over halfway down.
So
Yeah.
that was one of the criteria that you managed out performance on. So what the report is saying, and what the picked up on, is that people are raising a complaint, and it goes through the full complaint process, and the Ombudsman is saying that we're not remedying that complaint at the earliest opportunity. So his findings on the total number of complaints that have been dealt with over the last financial year is that we've not provided any. Okay, shall I start again then? So the zero remedies is around a criteria that the Ombudsman measures us upon, which is part of his overall analysis of our performance over the year. So that is around the Ombudsman wanting us to be able to encourage us to remedy a complaint at the earliest opportunity. And in the analysis he performed over the last year, we hadn't provided any remedy to any of the complaints that he had looked at. So what he's trying to encourage us to do now is to actually not wait for him to finalise his investigation, but to talk to the complainant, find out what their issues are, and put in place a remedy. And that remedy could be as basic as a formal apology letter, or it could be something around a compensation claim.
So we would expect a number that isn't 0 remaining.
Well, it would depend on the nature of complaints. One would hope that we would get better at dealing with complaints anyway. But yes, naturally, we would want to see the resolution to the complaints.
Something that both myself and Marv Portistle have encountered recently is complaints, comments being raised to us about the lack of acknowledgement of complaints. Is that it might be this is a serial complainer who is being treated as a vexatious complainant, but do we routinely send out acknowledgements?
We do. That is part of the process, that a complaint is acknowledged.
But they should all be acknowledged.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chairman. I think just coming back to the point you were making earlier as well about online and having to make an account. I mean, you do not need to make an account to make a complaint online and enter it online. There is no email address for complaints because there is an online form for it to be filled in, and then it naturally gets dealt with through the complaints section. So the comments you made earlier are not quite correct. I think if you go online now, you can kind of see there's a form there to fill in, and you don't need to make an account.
They were not my complaints, they were Councillor Garrett's comments, and he's saying that the website doesn't lead you to the form. If that's now corrected, then good news, but maybe someone after the meeting would like to just check that that is the case.
Chairman, I've just done it this minute in order to be able to advise you.
Delighted to hear that it's remedied already. Well done. That was quick, wasn't it? How's that for service? Councillor Lucioni.
Point 52, how are we going to, what are we going to do to increase it from 50% to 90% over the time?
The resolution rate for complaints at stage 1 is actually over 75% now. So I think it's about communication. So it's about training for staff to ensure that they're aware of how they can resolve complaints at the very early stage. And I think it's part of the cultural change that we're going through at the minute, whereby it's about being more open and transparent and acknowledging that you made an error and put your hands up. And what can you do to address that situation?
One other point relating to this, it's not necessarily to be in this report that it's for sort of public consumption, but the learning outcomes, is there a report internally somewhere that actually does record the learning outcomes to make sure that they are there for all time and for posterity?
Yes, there is. The learning outcomes are recorded on our CRM, the Customer Relationship Management System. I think you'll see in the report that there is some ongoing development work where our ICT colleagues are developing an online portal, and that will include all complaints, including the learning outcomes. So the aspiration is that nominated complaints officers will be able to run reports for their directors and their service leads, and those documents will be part of the discussions at service boards. So there should be not only evidence for the Ombudsman to say that we are looking and identifying and logging the learning outcomes, but that we're feeding back the constructive comments back into service delivery.
Councillor Luciani.
Just taking it back one stage, is this all done at induction now as well? So it's right at the start of anybody's lifetime of the council, yeah.
Councillor Lilly, Michael.
Thank you. This is probably not possible, but I do remember in a former life in corporate scrutiny that you arranged a visit for committee members to actually go to the call centre. It's probably not possible now, but it was very enlightening, and it was actually very useful for all the committee members to actually see your team working in action and actually dealing with calls and things. Perhaps we could note in the future when things are better, but actually I think it made understanding things like the complaints procedure and how things were dealt with by that visit, which actually was excellent, right? I know Councillor Garrett was with me. I think yourself, Councillor Quirk, we actually went together, I don't know how many years ago it was, but it was actually extremely useful to see that in action.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something we can arrange for the future.
Yeah, perhaps we note that in the future. Thank you.
Are members happy to note this encouraging report? Yeah. Hands. Thank you. We move on to commercialisation strategy, page 23 to 28. Are there any comments on this? Does anyone want to say anything towards it? No. Councillor Lilly.
I haven't got it in front of me, but I think perhaps if Paul Megan could find it, but this committee did, I think, a very thorough commercialisation report, right? Probably about 2 or 3 years now ago. I know Councillor Quirk was involved within it myself. I'm trying to think of the others that were actually involved in. Councillor Tyndall, particularly myself and Councillor Tyndall. Because I actually think it would be good to actually look at the things we raised then, right? in relation to now, especially post-COVID, because I think some of the things that perhaps we assumed, would be commercially viable are probably not now, because of the world has changed. And I think we should put that into context, really, within that. It's an uncomfortable thing to say, but one of the most successful sides of our commercial generation was actually bereavement and the bereavement services. And it's very uncomfortable to say that, but those are probably have greatly increased within that. But I mean, we had an excellent sort of service within that. But I do think the other areas which still would be there, like Leisure One, which is the leisure services. Obviously, Floating Bridge is completely probably different from what was anticipated previously. So it'd be good to actually revisit that report, which I know obviously the Assistant Chief Executive has, right, within that. And actually that report did influence what the commercial strategy under the previous administration was within that. So perhaps linked to the cabinet member, Councillor Jarman, in that regard.
I agree.
I mean, it's not the best of times to analyse how we're doing in terms of commercialisation when we've been following the pandemic. Councillor Lucioni. Karen.
I just wanted to say on number 8 that I've worked alongside Wight Care, so they're just a fantastic service that's invaluable to a lot of people on the island. So I'm glad to see that there's going to be somebody that's marketing that and getting that out a lot more, because they're great staff and great service.
I think the correct thing to do with this is to note the report and to revisit it at a later stage and put it onto our forward work plans when.
Just one more question. I like the Big Ideas programme. When is that actually going to be launched? Because that's great information for people, they've got ideas where they work in departments. It's number 7.
It's on the action plan, so it's the January 2022.
Councillor Lilly, Michael.
Totally agree with your proposal that is noted, and which I'm happy to propose. But I would, when it comes back, if it can come back alongside the corporate scrutiny's original commercial strategy report, so we've got something to look at how things have developed from that. Right? Thank you.
So if we note it, ask for it to come back in 6 to 8 months' time with a report. Wendy. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. The new administration has set out its corporate strategy, which obviously the leader will be talking about later. But as part of that, we will be reviewing the commercial strategy. So, and we're looking at the moment at putting the timescale towards that. A clear informer of that review will be the original work and report that came out of the Task and Finish group from Scrutiny previously. And we can also take the opportunity to link into really understanding the increased social value of the opportunity of investing on the island, the opportunity of investing in a way that generates local community wealth. And that's one of the key strands that we are looking, or 2 of the key strands that we're looking to bring into the new commercialisation strategy. I would just like to ask that rather than say come back in 6 months' time with something, can we tie in the conversation of timing with Councillor Jarman so that we come back at a time when we've done some work on the revised draft?
I think that's a perfectly reasonable request, but if we can request that we have it in time that we get it at the advanced thinking stage rather than at the final decisions made stage. Members happy with it? Councillor Lilly, Michael.
No, I'd just like to note that that original strategy was very strong about social value and social impact. And I think that's obviously something that will carry on under this current administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just very quickly, I was part of that working group with Councillor Tyndall and Councillor Lilly, looking at this strategy, the strategic action plan as well. Must be about 2 years ago, I think, wasn't it? So it's great to see that it's been delivered, and particularly pleasing to see that we're working with the Association of Public Service Excellence that are going to be doing some training with our leadership. I think it's sometimes just a flip of a mindset sometimes that is really helpful. And one of the ideas that we are bringing forward, you see it on the forward plan, the Cornwall pop-ups, was actually that I picked up going to an APSI seminar. So we can learn from each other, that's what I'm trying to say all the time, and we're just using the assets and the skill set we've already got, but just slightly reframing it. So I think sometimes it's not rocket science, just needs a different set of perspective and a confidence. That's great to see that the Big Ideas programmes are coming for a relaunch, so it's excellent.
Are we happy to note the report to encourage the reference back to the previous report and to ask that it comes back at an appropriate time in the future? Everyone happy with that? Yeah. Thank you very much. If we can now move on to the Island Planning Strategy Task and Finish Group. Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we've had 3 meetings so far, 3 2-hour meetings, and we've looked in the main, we've looked into the housing aspect and the environmental aspect. We've got 1 meeting to go of 2 hours, and then we'll be in a position to write our report. We're slightly behind schedule, as it were, and the reason for that is that there's been a number of delays. The initial delay was approving the scope of the Task and Finish Committee, which took quite some time to resolve. There's been inevitably over the summer a variety of holiday commitments and other matters which have meant that we've not been able perhaps to schedule the meetings, dovetail them as quickly and easily as we would have wished. And also I'm pleased to say 1 delay was caused by the fact that I was contacted by Diane Conyers of iWalk and also Cameron Palin here, who wished to address the committee, which they did, and also Bob Seeley. So for a variety of reasons, we're a little behind our schedule, but we are making good progress, and we will be in a position to have our report ready for the November meeting of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Spink. So if we note this report and put it on the forward plan for our November meeting. Councillor Palin.
Yeah, I just wanted to put on record, thank you to Councillor Spink for obviously inviting IWAP to speak to that. I've got our formal response I'm forwarding to you now to make sure obviously that's all incorporated, but obviously I think it's a really important opportunity for town and parish councils to make sure that our concerns that we have obviously all sent off to the Isle of Wight Council individually, but have been collated and shown that actually as a local county association we are working together really effectively to make sure that we've got a strong final report to the Isle of Wight Council from IWAC. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I can give a quick update on where we are with the consultation. The deadline ended for feedback on the 1st of October, as Councillor Spink will be aware. We had the sessions across the island. We met with over 600 residents, town and parish councillors, and the feedback has been quite good. We've had over 1,000 responses, so thank you for Councillor Spink for sort of like raising his sort of like support for the consultation as well. You know, it really is appreciated. One of the things that I mentioned to Councillor Spink in an email last week was I've directed officers to be able to provide an analysis summary, and I'm told that this will take place towards the end of November. So again, what we want to do is be open with the responses, but we're certainly getting a lot of feedback from residents about infrastructure issues and also the housing numbers. But again, I can't go into too much details because staff are sifting through the feedback that we've had from the consultation. But thank you very much for Peter Spink for his work over the summer period. I think we were all busy during the summer, Peter. So look forward to hearing what the Task and Finish group comes back with. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'd just like to say, Chair, thank you very much, Councillor, for that. And I believe you're going to attend our next meeting.
I'm looking forward to it, Chairman.
Good. Likewise.
Councillor Lilly, Michael.
I think just at this point, I would like to publicly thank Councillor Paul Fuller and the planning staff team for really going at it and actually getting to all parts of the community. I did attend one or two of the meetings, obviously near my area in Wight. And I just feel that the consultation was very visible. It was very engaging with the community, particularly engaged with the parish and town councils with it. And wish to thank you and the team, because that wasn't easy to actually do that, particularly with COVID and the current situations. So I'd like it to be noted to actually thank you for all the hard work. Thank you.
Yeah.
So as a group, do we endorse that thanks to the team, and also note the report and put it onto our forward plan for our November meeting? Everyone happy with that? Thank you very much. Now we move on to the corporate plan to receive a verbal overview by the leader of the council in relation to the proposed corporate plan. Councillor P.C. Wilcox, Laura.
Thanks, Chris. And could you please pass on my best to Councillor Hastings, please? Quite concerning that he's not very well. He's watching, is he? Oh, hi, Steve. Hope you feel better soon. Yes, we have finally finished the Alliance corporate plan, which sets out how we wish to take the council forward over the next 4 years. I'm rather pleased it's out the way. The plan is, as it sets out a way forward for the council, which is a new direction for the council. We're aiming to eventually get away from the process of managing decline by the ongoing process of cuts that has been the approach now for far too many years. It's not going to be easy to change that approach, as unfortunately it seems to have become ingrained in the many things we're doing. However, we must change, we know it must change, and that is what we aim to do. So there are 50 points in there. If anyone's got any questions and anything like that, please to take questions.
Questions? Councillor Lilly, Michael.
It's more of a thank you, Laura, for a very clear corporate plan. In future, I think the Corporate Scrutiny Committee will be able to look at the 50 particular things and actually ask. It's got good indicators that we can actually look and measure, and it's very clear with the core values, and particularly I'm pleased that the 3 key areas of action are very clear. We need the provision of affordable housing for island residents. As you know, I come from, as a psychologist, There's a thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you haven't got a decent roof over your head, your mental well-being is going to be very low, right? So with that, the fact that we as a council, and it's been noted by the Friends of the Earth, that we are one of the top councils in taking action on climate change and enhancing the biosphere. And the key about the biosphere, for me, is that it's about engagement of the community with its environment. And I think of that. And lastly, yes, economic recovery. We've been hard hit. We were hard hit before this, and we are hard hit now within that. So I just wish to actually compliment on this plan, and it's it's nice to actually see very clearly, one, what the different cabinet members are doing, because that wasn't always, I found that always difficult in the past. And I think as a document for corporate scrutiny, it is a good one to be able to actually use as reference as we go through the year. So thank you.
Cameron.
I've got a few questions going across the different portfolios. So first question to Councillor Andre. On page 40 of the plan, looking at, recommendation 26 and 27, obviously it's about youth engagement. On point 27, recommendation 27, sorry, it's about engagement with the Youth Council and Youth MP, and I wondered whether this would be considered to be extended to, obviously we've got many young town and parish councils, I can think of, at least 4 or 5 off the top of my head that are the under the age of 20, so it may be worth seeing if, wanted to reach out to those as an administration to work with them on, different outreach things, or whether it's the corporate parenting board or, any of those areas. Obviously, those are town and parish councillors which were obviously elected and I'm sure be willing to work with the administration.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Palin, for raising that. I am very, very keen, and we are very keen as an administration, and it's only right and proper that we do incorporate the voice of our young people very much into everything that we do. And in fact, that is one of our corporate priorities, that we will consider the impact on our children and young people of everything that we do. I have already met with the Youth Council, but I am very happy. If you would be willing to facilitate, I would be more than happy to meet with any young person that wants to engage with this council. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, if that's okay, Chair, is to Councillor Fuller. It's less of a question, really, but say thanks from IWAC, obviously, in recommendation 33. Not only are IWAC represented, but you're allowing town and parish councils now to come and speak, obviously, on planning about issues in their area. They know their area best, so I wanted to thank you for that, really. Next question is to Councillor Jones-Evans on page 45. Page 27 of the plan, sorry. There appears to be no mention at all of the levelling up bid the council applied for obviously for East Cowes, and I may have missed it, but I couldn't seem to see that anywhere in there, and whether that'd be worth mentioning or whether there's a reason that's not included.
So we talk about throughout the document about applying for all funding as we go throughout the life of this plan and this administration. We're hoping that we'll get the answers very soon about the levelling up. So probably that won't appear in here because with a fair wind will be positive, and that will then come into our key business as usual streams of work. So we'll just neatly slot in, and then if it doesn't, then we'll be looking at the East Cowes master plan as just being presented to your town council. So don't worry, East Cowes is very much on the radar.
Thank you. If okay, again, Chair, the next question is to Councillor Bacon on page 49 of the plan, recommendation 43. It says there to facilitate for all facilities to use 100% renewable energy where possible. I mean, I think there's no reason why that, where possible should be there. There's no reason now why we can't move towards having all facilities run by the council and owned by the council on renewable energy by 2024. So I think it may be worth reviewing that and getting that particular phrase out there.
I think you make a very good point, just looking at that and cogitating over it. So I'd possibly need to have a quick word with the relevant director over that, but I'd be more than happy to amend that if there's nothing that's. I'd be more than happy. I'd be more than happy to amend that unless there's some reason that doesn't immediately occur to me that's for caution. I can't think of one.
Thank you. The next question will be to Councillor Jordan. On page 51, recommendation, 45. Obviously talking about the floating bridge here. Personally, I'd like to say I don't think that second option of a floating bridge ever with working as intended is possible because the specifications and requirement contradict each other. But also, I was wondering, looking at this time frame, would we get a new floating bridge by the end of the administration? Because I think that it's a good milestone to show that this administration is doing something different compared to the previous one. You're already taking steps forward, which people are pleased about. Obviously, these things do take time, but what would the time frame be if an independent organisation were appointed in March 2022 to look at consulting with the community designing a new floating bridge? What's the time frame of getting that into service?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Cameron. As you know, we need to go through process in terms of the current review, which has been asked for by the SLEP. Unfortunately, it probably could have been done earlier this year, partly to do with COVID, partly to do with the elections. I guess it wasn't done. It's put us behind a bit, but that needs to come in. That's coming in by the end of November, as far as we're aware. Alongside that, we need to do the legal process in terms of mediation, which we've also asked to take place before the end of November. What we're looking at on this is to be somewhere by the end of this year in a position to understand what we need to do. Currently, the floating bridge is costing us substantial sums of money, and that will be part of the considerations when we have the report back as well. To answer your question, 3 years if we took a decision at the start of next year, if that's the direction, we would be towards 2024 before that vessel was provided, I would guess. It's all a bit of a guess in terms of that, but we'd hope to deliver it. For pointing it out, as part of our corporate plan, we will aim to find a permanent working solution to the floating bridge. That's what we're going to do, Cameron.
Thank you. And finally, a question to the Leader of the Council. When speaking with IWAC membership and the executive of IWAC, we feel that there needs to be a review of Protocol 16 of the Constitution, obviously coming under the corporate plan, that determines the relationship between the Isle of Wight Council and town and parish councils. The previous Leader of the Council intended to review it after the election. Obviously, he lost his seat, to take into account the increased role he wanted help to have. But of course, this was never done. And I believe it's important for this administration to review this and reflect the partnerships envisaged by the new administration, unlike the last.
Sure.
Will you review Protocol 16 of the Constitution to review the relations between the Isle of Wight Council and town and parishes? Thank you.
The Chief Exec wants to come in.
Sorry, Chairman, I might just add that is consistent with aim 3 on page 7 of my report, but about aiming to empower and enable parish and town councils. So it is part of the Constitution to review. It's already set out in the Constitution. We just need to find a time frame within the busy agenda that's been set out in this plan in order to do that, and we'll work on that over the next few months.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments? I'd just make a couple of comments. I think there'll be cross-chamber support for the need for affordable housing. I think there's cross-chamber support for the need for economic recovery, and I think you're you won't find that there will be a lot of people who are objecting to that direction of travel. There may be disagreements in how you would actually achieve it, but I don't think the direction of travel will be anything that is contentious. We've agreed between the chairs of the Policy and Scrutiny Committees and the chair of Corporate Scrutiny that we will sort of look at the corporate plan and divide it up into sort of for the different groups to look and scrutinise the policies, comment on the policies, and to comment on the performance against the plan. It's good that there are quantifiable objectives in there. I hope that we can break them down so that we can track the plan as it goes through, rather than just waiting to the end of the plan period and say, yes, it went really well, or oh dear, it went appallingly. And I think we need to look at sort of markers of success along the way in terms of how scrutiny can actually review it and comment on it and feedback on it. John.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to assuage your fears on that one, what we will intend to do is obviously turn this plan into part of our quarterly performance management reports that go to Cabinet and then obviously come to the various policy and scrutiny committees for consideration. So there's no way we're going to leave it till the end and then report back on it. The plan would be that we report on it quarterly. You get an opportunity to speak about it quarterly and see the performance against the key indicators quarterly as well. So it's very much an iterative process about what's going on and are we achieving what we said we'd achieve.
Yeah, but if you don't look at what the landmark points are in advance, you don't know whether you're up to, because you can put a curve that goes like that or a curve that goes like that. And achievement is very, very different, and it's important to actually decide what you are trying to achieve on what timescale and then measure against those achievements. The Chinese think that they're going to go up to sort of 2 years before the deadline and then close all their coal power stations. That's a very different scenario than doing it gradually in terms of the amount of carbon dioxide they put in the air. So the route is actually quite important, as well as the measures against the route. Councillor Lilly, Michael.
Thank you. I just want to ask one specific question, which is to the Chief Executive, well, to the Leader and the Chief Executive, in relation to page 7 and item 4. There's some specific, definite timescale on this. This relies on full support of our MP, collaborating and working with this administration in levelling up. As people probably remember, Portsmouth University did a detailed report and actually came up with a figure of sort of around 6 million that was which was the deficit we had compared to mainland authorities. That's probably, it might be good to get that re-collaborated because it's probably a bigger figure now. But that levelling up and getting in place an island deal, which I never saw, and as probably some members remember, I've always been an advocate for an Island Act to get that levelling up in place in the future. So my question is, how are we getting on with our MP in getting a delegation ready to go to the government to get the deal we need, which is clearly evidenced? And are we going to engage with Portsmouth University to actually get that collaboration of that figure, or what the real figure is now within that? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. I'll take that one if you don't mind. You'll recall as part of this year's local government finance settlement, the government awarded us £50,000 to improve the evidence base from what had been produced by Portsmouth University. We've worked with officials from what was the MHCLG, is now DLUHC, Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. So we worked with officials on preparing that evidence base jointly using third-party external advisors. One was a company called Local Futures, the other a company called Pixel, who also advised the government on their funding formula. That piece of work is now with the officials at the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. They're reviewing that and taking that into account. Only a couple of 3 weeks ago, I wrote to the Permanent Secretary asking, suggesting to him that now we were completing this work, would he take on board the arrangement of a meeting so that the leader, the MP and myself could meet with officials and a Minister or the Secretary of State to discuss that work. I've had a response that says once officials have finished considering the work, then they'll look to that meeting, but not just at this moment in time. I'm pleased to say the MP has followed up that particular letter with ministers. So we are still actively pursuing that approach. And we plan to also further contact the Secretary of State just to make sure that we keep the momentum going from the original letter to the Permanent Secretary. So I think that things have come to a head as planned with the £50,000 that we were allocated by the government. We've done our piece and now we're waiting for the government's response. Clearly, it won't be helped by the change of Secretary of State and the change of ministers. In fact, there was only, I know the MP actually met Minister Hall about this very same matter the day before he lost his job in the ministry. So unfortunately, we now have to go back around the circle about re-educating ministers about the case and how we've developed things. But I think we are well on top of that, and we are still pressing very actively for a further meeting and discussion with government.
Thank you for that. I would have thought Mr. Gove would know the Isle of Wight very well, being that I've seen him on holiday many times on the island, visiting his relatives who live and work here. So.
We are watching out for him at the ferry ports.
Once again, you have cross-chamber support on this. I spoke with Rishi Sunak and with Michael Gove last Monday. With both of them raised the issue of the island deal and the promises that we were made and reminded them of that. So, this is something that across the chamber we're all supporting. Any more comments? So we note the presentation and we will, outside of this meeting, allocate the areas of the corporate plan to the various committees of the scrutiny committees and sort out who's going to do what and what timescales. Thank you very much. So these are in a different order to the order that we have on our sheet. We'll take them on the order that they're appearing in the Cabinet papers to make it easier to follow the Cabinet papers. So the first one is the implications of the Health and Social Care Bill for the Council and the future of the Isle of Wight Integrated Care Partnership. Comments?
Councillor Lilly is Vice Chairman of the Committee. Does Councillor Lilly is Vice Chairman of the Policy and Scrutiny?
Councillor Lilly, you're as Vice Chairman of the Policy and Scrutiny Committee. Have you got something to say?
Well, I think that the relevant scrutiny committee is the health scrutiny in this regard, and I'm very conscious that at those committee meetings you have all the players from the relevant agencies there. It's the one committee of the council where you do have the external players clearly, the NHS, the CCG Public Health. And I'm very conscious that the cabinet member, the relevant cabinet member, Councillor, is not here. So I'm just conscious that I recommend that we actually refer this for more scrutiny at the relevant health scrutiny committee, and hopefully then the cabinet member is able to be actively involved in that, right? Within that. But obviously I think at the last scrutiny committee meeting, or the health scrutiny, we did go into detail regarding the integrated care partnership, and were briefed how that is being sort of assembled, because that's really, I can't really give any more comments than that within that.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to make the same point as Councillor Lilly. I think not this paper, but the issue was considered by the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee at its last meeting. I've represented those views within the paper as set out. I think any further development along this line would be subject to scrutiny by that particular committee. Obviously, where we are at the moment, this doesn't commit the organisation to anything in terms of that partnership, but it does reflect the fact that the Health and Care Bill is coming down the line. There will be statutory duty on us to work with health partners in a much more collaborative way. So this is the first step that we're taking in that particular approach, and we'll develop the approach as we go with appropriate scrutiny from that particular committee. So I'd commend the paper to you.
And I commend as well the fact that there has been terrific progress in collaboration with health partners within that, and also within the Health and Wellbeing Board and side. I know Councillor Nicholson, who's the chair of the Health Scrutiny, and I and other members have been quite critical in the past about the collaboration and information. So in a way, it's important to actually say that that is improving. And particularly, I think, work on during COVID, that collaboration became even stronger within that. Particular things like the vaccination programs and inside within that. Thank you.
I did have a conversation with Councillor John Nicholson, the chairman of the Policy and Scrutiny Committee. He raised concerns about the integrated care partnership and how open and transparent the information flow was in that particular group, and indicated concerns two areas in terms of dentistry and the representation of dentistry on the island, and also the transport issues, because the solar tends not to be recognised as part of the transport barriers, and the need for both of those to be addressed. So they are issues that were flagged by the chair of that committee. Councillor Lilly, Michael.
Can I just say, at the last health scrutiny meeting, those particular issues were really debated, and actually I know the leader of the council was, and in fact our MP, were very vocal and very engaged in the issue of dentistry, which is the biggest health inequality on this island, that we need levelling up, if we're going to use the word levelling up within that. And also the issue of travel and transport across. So it was, I do feel that there was very active engagement with all the key players in within that, and that committee is not going to let up on that issue, on those issues.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We're almost getting in danger of doing health scrutiny, but I did want to respond to the point on dentistry, which, just to be absolutely clarified, to be clear, falls outside of the remit of the integrated care system. It falls outside of the remit of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight CCG. It is driven by NHS England, and therefore, we need to look to NHS England in terms of those particular pieces of work. It's not a locally managed service. So But it may, as a result of the work that's set out in this paper, it may come under local management later on. But for now, it is an NHS England responsibility.
It is important to note that NHS England were there at the last meeting, and we did have a direct discussion with them, and they did say they took on board what we said, our various sort of views.
Councillor Downer, Rodney.
Thank you, Chairman. Going back to the dentistry bit again, and I suppose I shouldn't really, it should be included in along with other health, because poor dental health impacts on general health. So I think that, it should be in there. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman, I don't think anybody would disagree with that particular premise, but in terms of how it's organised, funded and commissioned at the moment, it's NHS England, although the move to the Hampshire and Isle of Wight integrated care system looks likely to pass that responsibility to the Hampshire and Isle of Wight geographical area at some point in the future, which might make it easier, might make it more difficult for us to address some of those issues.
Thank you.
Not under our control, we will still raise the issues and continue to do so. Fine. Yep, Councillor Lilly, Michael.
One of the things that has changed, which could have relevance, which we do perhaps need to highlight, is obviously Public Health England does not exist anymore. And there's been change. This was, I think, raised by the Director of Public Health, Simon Bryant, at the last health briefing we had. But it's important perhaps for this committee to note that there have been changes nationally, which we've been reassured are not going to affect us. But I can't remember Paul, what the change of the department now. There's a different department that's not Public Health England, which our Public Health is responsible to.
Chairman, again, at the risk of pursuing health scrutiny here, the new department is the UK Health Protection Agency. It's taken over from Public Health England. So far, we have a public health grant that we get from government. It's ring fenced for public health activity. There's no indication that that's going to change at all. Our public health responsibilities and accountabilities have not changed. They're discharged through the Director of Public Health. So that's all in the same place. The move to the integrated care system, however, does encourage some of our health colleagues and others to think more about longer term population health rather than just treatment of people at the front door. So it's a slightly change in emphasis in terms of health thinking as opposed to public health thinking.
In terms of our response to this, maybe number 4 on our list, that the committee offers no further comment on this matter, has been previously discussed by the relevant Policy and Scrutiny Committee. We support their recommendation. Yeah, happy with that? Flash a hand. Yeah, thank you, unanimous. The next one is the Better Care Fund update.
Chairman, if there are any questions on this, we have Laura Gordian, who's the Interim Director of Adult Social Care, on the screen, and she'd be happy to take any particular questions.
Any questions or comments?
I think it should be appropriate through the Health Scrutiny Committee.
Yeah. So we basically note this report? Yeah. Okay, everyone happy to note the report? Thank you. The next one is the Living Well and Early Help Service for adults. Any comments or questions? Any members of Cabinet want to make any comments? Officers? No? Note the report. Those in favour? Thank you. The next one is Ride Transport Interchange Consultation Feedback. Any comments or questions? Cabinet member want to make any comments?
Oh, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lilly, Michael.
I mean, it'd be useful if the cabinet member did update, but I particularly, I suppose, speaking as a Ryde councillor and also chair of Ryde Town Council, I do welcome the report, and one of the things I wish to compliment the cabinet member and his team is it actually gives detail of the background. There's been a lot of confusion. There was confusion with the petition that was put forward. And it's very interesting to see the background. It actually confirms the walkabouts that happened in 2019, which included some of the people that have been involved in the petitions. I'm not going to name people, but I think it's important to point out that I often, in the recent months, thought I was slightly going mad that I'd been involved in walkabouts and discussions with the change of the area that as if they hadn't happened, but they had happened, and they did involve a range of community organisations and community representatives within that. And I think that the change, and particularly the removal of the toilets and the cafe, was to enable people to come down the, particularly the new walk pedestrian area on the pier, to be able to see and walk to Union Street, because the way that people had walked before is they hadn't actually, they'd sort of moved away into the bus station and away, and weren't, you know, actually going to the main heart of the town, which is where the businesses are and, you know, shopping area, etc. And that change would enable that. I think it's also important that Ryde Town Council, you know, has always been in consultation about the toilets, and the key was that those toilets needed upgrading and new toilets, and we needed changing areas. Changing places area, because we actually have not got that in Ryde. And we actually need that in the modern world to for accessibility for all our citizens to have that. And this was an opportunity to get, you know, brilliant toilets with brilliant facilities that will really actually cater for community. And it will also, which was very important, deal with antisocial behaviour, because that area has had its problems. A number of my colleagues, Councillor Lucioni, Councillor Stevens, and Councillor Jordan, have been involved over the last 2 years of problems with antisocial behaviours in that, which actually did relate access to those toilets. And that's why we have a security company that actually opens them and locks them within that. So there is sort of changes in that. And the other kind of thing which is important is there was a very good consultation recently with Ryde Town Council and the Neighbourhoods Department and Highways at the Esplanade, which a considerable amount of local residents did get involved with. I think the particular one criticism, but I think is taken on board, is the way it was presented, and we inherited, obviously there's an inherited of that, was a visualisation. People needed drawings to see what it looked like. And I know one of the problems was the South West trains haven't supplied the drawings to fill the sort of set. But it would have been much easier for people to see what it looked like if there'd been proper visualisation. But I actually think that there has now been good consultation, and I think we can start, and therefore I support this cabinet and report and recommendations from RIDE, and I think that's important. At the end of the day, this it's important for the whole Isle of Wight, but actually it's RIDE residents who've got to live with this, right? Thank you.
Cameron.
Thank you. Michael touched on a point I wanted to speak about, and obviously that's the importance of the liaison and partnership of town and parish councils. And I think we've seen from this administration already that they've got a clear directive to work with us because they know our area best. And the consultation's a prime example of how actually residents felt they were listened to. You've made changes to the plans already. People feel far more empowered when these decisions are made. And I think the plan itself, of course, it focuses on transport, but it has implications for the environment. Obviously, people using public transport more, the economy, people are able to see Union Street, and hopefully that will lead to greater regeneration. So whilst this one project is obviously focusing on the development of the transport area, but actually has far wider implications that should massively support the agenda this administration is pushing forward. So obviously I massively welcome that, and thank them for engaging with town and parish councils once again.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from Councillor Lilly's comments, I note that the consultation hasn't led to very many changes. It sounded like, Councillor Lilly, you thought that the consultation that's taken place recently has meant a sort of a complete change in direction in the way that the whole project is being approached and dealt with. I would disagree. I think outcomes are the most important thing, and there are very few changes, and they're very minor. My own concerns are fairly extensive, and they're recorded elsewhere. I do have concerns for the public toilets and their long-term security, because they're no longer under the jurisdiction of either council, either Ryde Town Council or the Isle of Wight Council. I'm also slightly concerned that it's seen as a positive to knock down a cafe and a public toilet block so that we can see Union Street. I think Union Street is perfectly visible to anyone who comes off the pier. So I found that a slightly strange comment. But my opposition to some of the details of the plans have been recorded elsewhere. So there's no point in me repeating them here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lilly. Michael.
I just want to clarify things. In relation to the toilets, from what I believe, because it's a building that will have to be demolished within that, it still has to go through a planning process, which it will do, and there will be then an opportunity. Through that, there will also be discussions with Ryde Town Council, and the view is that Ryde Town Council will have a proper agreement with South West Railways with clear sort of conditions regarding that. Those talks have not happened as yet, but the thing, in the case of the to my knowledge, and my learned colleagues over there can actually answer it, in place of the cafe, that will be replaced by another cafe, and the owner of the cafe is in negotiations with the Isle of Wight Council, and I've seen a picture of it, and it's a very nice actual cafe, and actually the idea is to develop that area to enable other businesses, restaurants around the area to have pop-ups and be involved in that area. And I think during the consultation, there was a very much an input of how to make Western Gardens more green, more interactive, and actually, have more activities and help with the real development of the high street through the Has and Union Street, which is making that area buzz of activity, and nearly 18 new businesses in the last 6 months in that street. So Ryde is coming alive, and I can actually see that. I think there's been some misinformation, Councillor Robinson.
Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, on a point of misinformation, could I just clarify this, and perhaps the cabinet member could clarify, an intention to replace the cafe with another cafe, I think is what I heard from Councillor Lilly. Is that correct?
There are a concession going into the station that we know as part of the arrangements with South Western Trains, as is the toilet block part of the funding grant, which is going into the station. This is part of the misinformation that's going on. The toilet block is not going. It's not run by the Isle of Wight Council. That's the second thing. The cafe will be replaced with other concessions within the station. It's a complete misinformation.
Councillor Robertson, Joe.
I take issue with that. It's not wrong to say that the cafe that's there, the existing building and the existing toilet block are being levelled, and there's going to be an increase of concrete in that direction of the Western Gardens. I accept, obviously, there's being provision made for toilets within the station. My concern is that they are at arm's length. The council has less control and Ryde Town Council have less control. A legal agreement could be very short-term agreement. It hasn't even been drafted yet. I don't think it's improper to have concerns about the future of the toilet block in that area.
The toilet block is part of the grant funding arrangement with the Department of Transport. I can't repeat and say it strongly enough. The toilet is going into the station, will be upgraded, will be fully accessible, and will be open to all. This narrative of misinformation is perpetuated through this. It is untrue to say that the toilets are at risk. They are not.
Councillor Lee, Michael.
Can I also add that the money saved to Ryde Town Council and running those toilets directly through this new arrangement will enable the Town Council to consider putting toilets into the centre of the town, which is actually where they're really needed. Because at the moment, if you're in the centre of Ryde, you've got to go to St John's Road, which is quite a walk at the bottom end of the high street, or you've got to walk down the hill to the toilets. So actually, from the Ryde Town Council's point of view and the residents of Ryde, we're actually probably going to get more toilets, right, and actually a better service than actually we've currently got. So I see it as a win-win situation.
Councillor Stevens, did you want to make a comment?
I thought we were talking about the interchange project and not a plot on Ryde seafront with a beef burger stall and some toilets. As far as I'm aware, and the cabinet member can correct me, the transport interchange can go ahead without raising buildings to the ground if need be, and that is what we're here, or that's what I think the paper is focused on. It's not focused on toilets and beef burgers. Thank you.
I don't think we have a consensus on this one, but my feeling is probably that we're in a position to note it and the majority of us support it. Would that be a fair comment? Councillor Lilly, then Councillor Luciani.
Well, I was going to, we can go to a vote, I'm quite happy, and we can propose, I'm happy to propose that we support the report, and if someone seconds me, I will be going to vote.
Someone likes to second that? Councillor Luciani.
Oh, I just wanted to make it clear that when it came to our committee, Neighbourhoods and Regeneration, it was the consensus of that committee that we supported this project.
Thank you. So we're supporting, noting and supporting this resolution, this motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? Abstentions? Carried. We now move on to the bus service improvement plan. Councillor Mifflin, John.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to strongly welcome this bus service improvement plan. There's one little item I just want to query, which I found a bit odd, and I want us to have a think about the final vision statement, because I don't think it's quite strong enough in terms of the wider strategic policies that we're seeking to follow at the moment in terms of carbon change, carbon targets and transformative change. On page, what's a horribly long way, isn't it? It's 258. It's under the headline targets of the plan. There's one called 7B, and it talks about setting the minimum emissions specification to include within all future tenders. And the date given for us to do this is 9 years' time. It just seems that when it's such an urgent question, we should be doing this far more quickly. So I'd like to see that. I'm wondering why that timescale is so odd, and I think it doesn't really emphasise enough the importance of the carbonisation of bus fleet that we would like to see. And that takes me to our second point. On the next page, 260, we've got our overall proposed vision statement. And this doesn't really go, as far as I'm concerned, it's not really green enough. It talks about working partnership and it's shaping provision, meeting the needs of residents and visitors. It's all very good, but there's nothing there about decarbonisation until you get to the very last sentence when it's kind of added on as an afterthought, whilst addressing emerging challenges, including the reduction in greenhouse gases to achieve the climate change objectives. I think it would be better if in the fourth line from the bottom, the final sentence read, through partnership working and ongoing joint investment, through decarbonisation of the bus fleet, the BSIP will enable passenger growth to meet the future needs of the island, whilst addressing emerging challenges, including the reductions in greenhouse gases to achieve the island's climate change objectives. So I'm just thinking that would be, I don't know whether I'm allowed to do this, I'm still getting used to scrutiny, but I'm just thinking it needs to be tightened. I'd like to see this phrase tightened up, so maybe that's something I could ask of Councillor Jordan to comment on.
Councillor Jordan, Phil, would you like to comment?
Thank you. Well, it's noted. Of course, it's an aspiration by 2030 on 7B to become the norm. So we're not saying it, we're not going to do it till 2030. We're saying by 2030 we will have a minimum emission specification. So any time between now and then, John, I guess. What was it? The other thing was, I think it was about our plan. Well, this partnership improvement, this service improvement plan leads on to the enhanced partnership plan in next March, and from which we hope to be able to bid from the £3 billion government grant funding. Some of the indications are that we need to be creative and strident in our offer and our aspirations. So we're trying to build that into our way forward and into our enhanced partnership with the with Southern Vectis. If you feel it's not strong enough, we could maybe take a look at it. It's a subjective. It's our aspiration. We're working towards carbon neutrality. by 2030, 2035. So I don't know. I'm happy to hear other comments, but it's all about creativity in terms of getting grant funding for sure.
Thank you, Phil. I'll just sort of come back very quickly. This was really my concern, because obviously the criteria for getting the funding, because we have put in really imaginative ideas. And at the moment, we're looking at real-time information, which would be fantastic. But I think we need to be looking at something really imaginative, making the island a sort of having a vision of decarbonising transport on the island, thinking about the council fleet and other vehicles, encouraging electrification and other forms of decarbonisation and bus use. And I think we've really got to show that, have something quite dramatic, have a banner to wave so that we can get attention, because we'll be up against every other local transport authority in the country trying to get that £3 billion. And we need to have a distinctive message. That's my point.
Do you want me to answer that? Thank you, John. Thanks, Chair. John, yeah, I take your points. All the meetings that I attend, everyone's talking carbon neutrality. Everyone, everywhere. And as fast as they can deliver it, they will. To put that into a bid, yeah, it's part of our bid, sure. Is that the kind of creativity the government looking for? Probably not, because they're hearing it all the while. And of course, they're driving their own aspirations. It's government, after all, that set the 2030 and 2035 on a move away from carbon fuel vehicles. Happy to talk about what creativity looks like, but we need, whatever we do here, we need to be able to secure interesting, substantial sums of money from that grant funding. But of course, every other local authority is going to be saying the same thing.
Councillor Lilly, Michael.
It was just I suppose a sort of point, but it leads to a question. But in developing our bus services, obviously we talked about the importance, and obviously it's in the corporate plan, with working with town and parish councils. You have in every area certain areas which don't have bus routes, right? That are actually quite difficult and inaccessible. I'll use one example, which is, I think there is a solution to, but this council supported Ryde Village. And Ryde Village is, in fact, a very good, right? A project led by Southern Housing in a part of Ryde which actually is not on the main bus routes. They have developed a community bus, and residents in that complex are able to easier get into town. But that had to be provided, and I think that there are areas, particularly with an increased demographic of elderly, where we do need to work with town and parish councils in finding little local solutions to get people up hills and things in their communities, because that often people are living not necessarily close or very close to accessible bus routes, with that particularly in our sort of rural or out of town settlement areas. I just wondered whether, as part of this, there is going to be consultation with town and parish councils who are going to know more of that local information.
Yes, well, of course, consultation. But it's part of our spirit, isn't it? That's what we want to do. Talk to our town and parishes. We want their help and assistance. It's very much part of our administration's drive to do that. So on the buses, absolutely, there'll be a lot of consultations. There's a lot in this when it comes through the enhanced plan, and there are there are interesting ideas about extending the network, about more frequency of buses, more rural buses, more often, single ticket journeys, one price, buy a ticket in Newport and go to London on one ticket through the ferries and the trains. That this kind of development is very much part of how we're trying to move it forward. And the interesting thing about this, of course, is if you just start saying that the buses may not be used at certain times, it's a catch-22. What we have to do is, in line with building infrastructure, is encourage more people to use the buses more often. And the way you do that is to make it more efficient, more reliable. So times of journeys, it's great if people know they get on in Ryde and get off in Newport in 20 minutes, for example. Not 40 minutes or 38 minutes, but 20 minutes. And that there's 3 or 4 buses an hour, for example. People start to depend and have confidence in using that mode of transport. And when you link that, interestingly, the last item you were looking at was the Ryde interchange. You start linking it with a transport interchange where onward journeys become more easy in terms of, for example, electric bikes, taxis, cars, trains. You start to see a build-up of an infrastructure that we hope will encourage people. But it's a long journey. It's 20, 25, 30 years. But we've got to start making changes, because if you haven't noticed, there's too many cars on this island. Too many cars, full stop. But you know, we're at capacity at some junctions. One of the ways is to get single vehicle journeys out of the equation, and more people on transport where we move more people around at the same time. So it's a long journey, Michael. You can be part of it if you want. Paul is, he's gone.
I use the buses quite regularly, so I am part of
it. I think we're probably at noting and supporting. Those in favour of noting and supporting? Yes, unanimous. Thank you very much. The next one is Floating Bridge 6, the next steps. This is a very sensitive issue because of the fact that we're sort of in dispute with the designers and builders. I think we'll just maybe look at the where we are and how we got here, and then note it if people are happy with that. Originally, the 2 administrations ago, someone in this room negotiated a very good deal with the LEP to get the funding for it. Contract was entered into, and 2 of the members sitting on my right-hand side signed off the documentation that put the contract into place. The contract had specifications that defined how the process would go if we had got into a dispute situation. That was envisaged that it wouldn't happen. The last administration took on the floating bridge, hoping it would work, and following the contracted process, tried to make it work. It couldn't. It became apparent that it wasn't working. So the previous administration initiated the process for the discussions with the manufacturers to sort out the dispute. The current administration is continuing that process. That's where we are. In addition to that, we are producing a report for the LEP that defines on the funding. It would seem appropriate for this committee to defer discussion of this matter until that report comes out. But we encourage the administration to continue to seek redress from the designer and builder. Cameron.
Obviously, it's not touching on anything of the legal side of it, but I think it's also important to note that the leader of the council, Dave Stewart, did rule out a new floating bridge for many years in a row, and it's this administration which is showing a difference and actually moving forward with that legal process, which didn't actually begin like it should have earlier in the year. My question is about, the current state of play at the moment. Do we have a reason why the floating bridge is out of service until mid-November? Because obviously in the documentation here it describes the repairs that were going to be happening October time. Supposed to have been back in the 17th of October, but obviously, we're unaware of what issue that has happened to cause it not to be in until November. What size of a scale issue are we talking here? Are we talking something that needs to be completely new manufactured, or is it an issue of actually getting somebody to come down and fit it? What issue have we got that is going to take another month to resolve?
My understanding is that the current situation is exactly the same as it was with the previous administration. The actual discussions with the designer and the manufacturer have not actually taken place yet. So that's exactly where it was with the previous administration. It's not that they did nothing, they initiated the process. It's continuing, and in the last 5 months it hasn't continued any further. Now, in terms of what's wrong with it now, maybe someone would like to address that. Are we happy to note this and move it on to this?
Chairman, I think that's best. I think we've already published what's wrong with it now, but if not, then we can do that outside of the meeting and make Councillor Palin aware.
So we will consider. We note this and we will consider it when we consider the report that goes to the LEP. Thank you. Housing civil penalties.
I did say it was a good paper, and I know you've all read it, but I'd like to pay a compliment to the officer that drew up the paper, Colin Rowland. I thought he did a fantastic job with this. Thank you.
Note and support with thanks to the officer. Thank you. Options for the future of Chillerton and Rookley Primary School. Any questions or comments? Contentious decisions to be made. The only concern that I have is whatever you come to is the funding implications of whatever decision is made, and how that is addressed, because it does have an implication. Do we note this report? Everyone happy to note it? Thank you. Rough sleepers accommodation grant. Any questions, comments? Notes and support? Hands again. Thank you very much. Isle of Wight Council Corporate Plan, we've actually dealt with above on the agenda. Again, maybe we can just formally note and support it here. And that's the end of the Cabinet agenda items. If we go on to the committee work plan, the forward plan, we've identified a couple of things from this meeting that we're putting onto our forward plan.
Yeah, that's, the forward plan is, the forward plan firstly is the council cabinet decision making.
Right.
And then it's our work plan after that.
Right, sorry. So we have
I think, Chairman, reference has already been made by yourself about a special cabinet or a cabinet meeting in December. So we'll no doubt have a meeting of Corporate Scrutiny Committee the day before.
Yeah, so
arranged.
There is an extra cabinet meeting in December because of the weight of work, I believe. So there will be an additional corporate scrutiny meeting. The intention is obviously to consider the cabinet papers, and rather than clogging up our agenda, we've got a couple of items that need to go onto our agenda in the coming couple of months. This seems a convenient place to put it. So we've got 2 items.
That's right. They're the references referred to earlier from the Audit Committee, Chairman.
Yeah. So if we pick up the work from the Audit Committee at that meeting as well, that should give us a complete agenda. Any other items that people feel we should put on the corporate scrutiny agenda at this stage? If anyone comes on, Councillor Lilly, Michael.
If it refers to the work plan, you can ask it now, Chairman. Sorry? If the question refers to the work plan, you can ask it now.
Okay. Can I ask my question now?
Go on.
My question, which was to the chair, was about white fibre, and to ask this committee, or if it's relevant to the neighbourhood committee, that a white fibre be asked to come to one of our scrutiny meetings, similar to we've requested Southern Water, other utilities, and the transport organisations. It's quite normal practice for scrutiny to ask public services, even if in the private sector, to actually come to this committee. And I wish to put forward that we actually have the directors of White Fibre come to actually ask questions. I'm sure all members have experienced right across the installation of white fibre across the island, and probably witness every day the patchwork on their pavements and side, and also the horrendous disorganisation in actually laying this, so that whole towns like Ryde get completely blocked up because they actually put a number of areas where they're not doing work with diversion signs and that, with no real consultation with Island Roads or our highways, and use the legislation of the utilities to protect them, right, from actually being part of that. So you've had instances where I've had residents who have been told they're going to have Island Roads resurface their roads, are given notice, then suddenly white fibre, unannounced, suddenly is digging up the area, which means that roads are put back 2 years in the programme within that. And I'm told by Island Roads and by the Cabinet Member for Highways and by neighbourhoods and things, that they have no powers to bring this company to that, a company that we actually supported in getting millions of pounds out of the government to make this a digital island. And I actually think it's about time we actually brought them to account for the residents of our residents in that. So that's my view of, I would like to put forward that we put them on our work plan. Thank you.
With the agreement of the chairman of the Policy and Scrutiny Committee for Neighbourhoods and Regen, that would seem the appropriate place to consider this. Would you be happy to put that on your forward plan?
No problem with that, but we've already got our meeting for next week. So it wouldn't be till January because we don't sit as much as other committees. So we could have an informal where people could actually come speak to them maybe away from the committee instead. Would that be?
It will give them a reasonable time to sort of,
Well,
not have an excuse.
I'm happy to take that recommendation, although I do think it should be in public, but there you are. But if
we wouldn't be able to get it on next week, so
okay.
The next one is January.
It's within the remit of neighbourhoods and regeneration.
Okay.
Michael, they still meet in public. Yeah. I mean, it may not have a big audience, but they meet in public.
I accept, I think.
Of some help, the director of neighbours could address you, but just to say, Wight Fibre are going to be carrying this work on for another couple of years yet, minimum. So 2 or 3 months, it's not going to make a lot of difference to the chaos that we've got. So just to, I hope that's helpful.
I'm not totally convinced getting them in is going to make a lot of difference, but I think we should try it.
Yeah, we got the chief execs of the ferries companies in this chamber one time, all 3 of them, not at the same time. They dished in and out of the room, but they came.
Colin.
Can I just say, Mr. Chairman, I'd recommend that we bring Island Roads along to that similar conversation. Wight Fibre are on an improvement plan, which is part of the statutory controls that we do have. But I think it needs both sides of the story when you have that conversation.
Councillor John.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a wider issue here. The wider issue is if we're going to move forward as a digital island, the question is whether we should be continuing to dig up the roads and lay cable anyway. You'll be aware that even our own Wight Care organisation are now replacing the devices in homes with wireless devices rather than connected to the telephones, and that Openreach have already announced the dates for termination of landlines in various areas. In fact, I stayed with friends in Wales just this week past, and their landlines have already been terminated in their area. So the fact that we are allowing an organisation to continue digging up the roads to lay physical cable is one option, but there are other viable options that we should be considering.
So no one, if anyone has anything else they think ought to go onto the forward plan, then contact either Steve Hastings or if he's not back, then myself. And that takes us on to members' question time. No one's given me notice of questions. Does anyone have any questions they wish to ask? No? Weren't quick enough? Close the meeting. Thank you.
Very good, considering the size of that. Because it helps. It helps focus, doesn't it? Because no one's got any comments. Why? Yeah. No. The problem is the longer you leave it, the more someone might think, oh, I might ask